All right, I am live again this week for my weekly live show. Today I'm going to be talking about, what am I going to be talking about? Decisions. Okay, so earlier in the week, I talked about starting and a little bit about being a beginner. I'm going to start it off today with a couple of questions for you. When was the last time you asked yourself, how do I want to live my life for the next year, the next 5 years, or the next 10 years? When was also the last time you decided you would commit to doing an action to make any of those realities for yourself a reality? And when was the last time you've more or less acted in that way? So earlier in the week, I read off an email that I had sent out to my network. And in that, I had talked about the kind of derision that we all sort of face just being adults, learning something new, beginning something new. There seems to be this kind of expectation as adults that we just have it all figured out, that we're not beginners. If someone decided I'm going to be a comedian tomorrow, or if I decided I'm going to be a comedian tomorrow, and I absolutely sucked at it, others will tell me I had no talent for it. And instead of just saying, okay, he just started out, maybe it's something new, maybe he'll evolve, typically, for some strange reason, as an adult, it's always a matter of talent, as opposed to how much time was spent to learn that activity. So that's what I talked about a little bit earlier in the week. And today I'm just gonna dive in a little bit into decision making. I'm not necessarily going to dive into how to make decisions per se, but I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we face when we come to making a decision. So what does the beginner struggle with? Like, why is it that we tend to have all this difficulty in just making a decision, right? Maybe you had all these amazing ideas in your head, these amazing business ideas. Maybe you thought, I'm going to make this massive change in the new year, but for whatever reason, you got cold feet. You just never followed through on that, right? For some of us, there is this kind of window of time that we need to establish before we make a decision. Whatever kind of arbitrary time that is, some of us just seem to have that for some reason, right? And that really clogs up the decision-making process for us. Others of us seem to want a good deal of data before we actually make a decision. And that's another thing that slows us down, with the reality being that you can't ever have enough information to actually make a decision. Typically, when we make decisions, we have at best maybe 10 or 30% of any given data that we need to actually make that decision. Typically, we just have to make it and then just trust our intuition that it was, one, the right decision to make, and then also trust ourselves that if it wasn't the right decision to make, that we're going to make the best one for ourselves later down the line. The other kind of issue that creeps up too is burnout and overall anxiety, right? We're so concerned about all the what ifs out there, right? That we just struggle to make a decision in the moment. And then let's not even get started about decision fatigue. We make probably hundreds of very minor, unimportant decisions throughout the day, especially if we're working professionals. And that just makes it all the more difficult for us to make an actual decision when it comes time to it, when it comes time for us to do so. So those are all the ways, or some of the ways, it's not an exhaustive list, of course, that we struggle, or why we struggle to make a decision. The question becomes, how do we actually get past that, right? One way is to practice making decisions. a lot of us, instead of practicing decision making, what we practice instead is how to sit on our hands long enough until things get really bad for ourselves, right? We tend to wait for this kind of no return sort of zone, or this really shocking revelation that jolts us into action or jolts us to a decision. And if we're waiting for those moments, one, they don't always come. But when those moments do come, they can be disastrous. And it comes with it a lot of pain. Why not make the decision before all that pain, right? Ultimately, we want to be able to make decisions in a state of peace and a state of calm without waiting for this kind of random external force, this frightening external force to force us into actually making a decision. So, practice decision making. Just make a bunch of small decisions and follow through with them, right? So I'm going to make a decision tomorrow to wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm going to keep to that. And when I make that decision, I'm going to scaffold my life, scaffold my environment, change things around so that I have to follow through with that decision. So that I can trust myself, build that trust with yourself to make decisions, to follow through, right? The other thing is simply just pick a path. Understand you can't have all the information you possibly want. Pick a path, follow it, double down on it, and then course correct later. We all have the ability to course correct. So that means at any moment after we've made a decision, we can make a change, right? We're never actually locked into decisions. Most decisions aren't all or nothing. It's a spectrum of gray. And I think the coolest thing, and I think that's the coolest thing about decision making, right? It's understanding nothing is written in stone. Just as quickly as I made decision A, I can pivot to B or C. But of course, if you make a decision, give it enough time, wait around long enough for it to prove to you that it doesn't give you the results or what it is that you want. The other tidbit here is to simplify. Decisions tend to be really difficult to make because we make it much larger than it actually needs to be. We wait for all this data. We wait for all these stories. We wait for everyone to give us their opinion. And then by the time it comes for us to make a decision, we have a textbook. We have documents on top of documents. And it's like, you can't sift through all that information. And if you wait to sift through all that information, it might be too late, or you might wait until the absolute last second to make a decision. And that might actually affect the end result. What does simplification look like? Well, for me, personally, that looks like just asking myself, what is it that I want? And does this decision support it? Yes or no? If I answer yes to that, I make that decision and I jump through that path. And then whatever happens afterwards, I just trust the universe, trust myself, trust God that it will just simply work out, right? And I have to mentally kind of tell myself to do that because I know I can be one of those people who overanalyze everything and wait until the absolute last second to make a decision. But the reality is like the world moves so quickly, business moves so fast. If we're waiting for everything, we will make a decision when it's too late. And that's what we want to avoid. Another thing you can do as well, I'm not too versed with this one, but making a decision tree. I think the Harvard Business Review has a nice little tutorial or article about making your own decision-making tree. There are also decision-making trees out there that you can just find on Google Images. I know I've used one in the past where it's a basic decision-making tree where do I want to go outside or do I want to go out to this social event, and then you go down the different paths of the tree, and then eventually you get to a point where you either say yes or you say no to that outcome. So that's another great way to go about making a decision, kind of avoiding a lot of the mental works that stop us from actually making a decision. I think one of the simplest ways of going about making a decision is getting more in tune with that intuition, or just asking, what do I want? And just acting in line with that. Also, Ethan, I saw that you joined. Uncle Veril also saw that you joined as well. Hello. I've pretty much wrapped up. If either of y'all have any questions that you'd like to ask, I'd be more than happy to answer those before I hop off here. But that was essentially what I just wanted to share this week about decision making. Ultimately, make a decision, start today. The best time is to start. Typically, we cannot learn. It's just too much information to learn before we actually commit to starting something. More times than not, it's just best to start it. Start that business, start that idea, reach out to those people, whatever idea it is, just do it. And then over time, the process of doing, the process of acting, the process of beginning, the process of committing brings with it wisdom, it brings with it understanding, and you just become sharper as you go through the motions. All right, everyone, it was a pleasure. I hope that this video was of help to you. If it was, do feel free to share it with others. Tag your friends, tag your family. I want us all to get to a point where we can ultimately get past our anxiety, get past our burnout, maybe even avoid our burnout and anxiety altogether, and just live our best lives and become the best version of ourselves. So if this is something that speaks to you, let me know. Let's talk. Let's chop it up. And who knows? Maybe we might have a partnership somewhere down the line together. Have a good one.